used to laugh when people told me night shift jobs were haunted. Ghost stories, urban legends. They always seemed like something people made up just to make their boring shifts less painful. That was before I worked at the Brookhaven Inn. That was before I learned what it meant to sit in the silence of an empty lobby, waiting for something you couldn't see but knew was there. It happened on one of my very first weeks at the job. I still remember the weather outside, humid, sticky, the kind of night where the air feels heavier than your own body. The cicadas were buzzing like a distant alarm, and the parking lot was a desert of empty cars under the dim yellow lights. The lobby itself was plain, nothing extravagant, just 2 glass doors, a counter with the brass service bell, a rack of brochures that no one ever touched, and a set of cameras feeding into a monitor in the back office. For most of the night, that bell was my only company. The ticking of the clock was the second. At first, the shift was what you'd expect. A couple of late check-ins, some phone calls, the usual paperwork. Around midnight, everything went quiet. I sat in the lounge with my phone, scrolling, sipping on an energy drink. I'd almost convinced myself the night would drag along uneventfully. Then it rang, the bell on the counter, a sharp metallic ding that jolted through the silence. I frowned, stood, and walked into the lobby expecting to see someone. Maybe a late guest, maybe a delivery guy. But the counter was empty. The glass doors were shut. The parking lot looked deserted, and the silence was as thick as ever. I checked the lot anyway. Nothing. Not a single person out there. I went back, shrugged it off, and sat down again. 10 minutes later, it rang again. This time, my skin prickled. I knew I hadn't imagined it. The sound echoed too loudly to be a trick of the mind. Again, I checked. The doors were closed, the lot still quiet, the counter empty. A part of me wanted to laugh it off. Maybe it was just nerves. Maybe some prankster had slipped in. So, instead of retreating, I stayed put. I pulled a chair behind the counter, dimmed the lobby lights, and fixed my eyes on that little brass bell. The silence stretched. 5 minutes, 10, 15. My eyelids grew heavier. My head started to nod. I almost convinced myself nothing was wrong. Then the bell rang, and I saw it. A pale hand, thin as bone, creeping up from beneath the desk. Its fingers curled over the edge of the counter, and with deliberate calm, it pressed the bell right in front of me. I leapt from the chair, nearly toppling it, and bolted into the back office. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slammed the door shut and twisted the lock. For a long moment, I stood in the dark, forcing myself to breathe, telling myself I must have been hallucinating. But when I looked at the monitor, my blood froze. The lobby camera showed the tipped-over chair, the bell sitting innocently on the counter, and movement. A head poked out from behind the desk. No features, just the faint outline of a hood and 2 glinting eyes reflecting the dim lobby light. They were looking directly at the camera, directly at me. I stumbled back from the monitor. My fingers shook as I dialed 911. I whispered into the phone, told the dispatcher someone had broken in, someone was inside the building with me. She told me to stay calm, stay where I was. Officers were on the way, but the monitor didn't let me rest. The figure crawled out from behind the counter, moving on hands and knees like an insect. He stood, tall, hood pulled tightly around his face, posture bent unnaturally forward. Then he began pacing, circling the lobby like he owned it. At one point, he stopped in front of the glass doors, staring outside as if waiting for something. or someone. Then he turned and started walking down the hallway, the same hallway that led to the office door where I was hiding. The doorknob rattled once, just once, slow, deliberate. I froze, every muscle in my body screaming to run, but refusing to move. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the phone, asking if I was safe. I couldn't even speak. My throat locked shut. After a long silence, the footsteps retreated. I rushed back to the monitor, praying I wouldn't see what I feared. The man was back in the lobby, casually flipping through brochures like a bored tourist, as if mocking me. Minutes dragged like hours. Finally, flashing blue and red lights cut through the darkness outside. Police cars pulled into the lot. The figure noticed. He snapped upright and bolted out of frame. I heard the glass doors swing open. By the time the officers cleared the lobby, he was gone. All they found was a rock near the door, wedging it slightly open. The lot was empty. The road, silent. Whoever it was had vanished into the night. The officers told me it was probably some vagrant, someone looking to scare me or steal. But I can't forget that hand. Too pale, too calm, too deliberate. Or the way those eyes seemed to stare directly into the camera, into me. Now, every time that bell rings at night, I think of that moment. And I know I'll never look at that desk the same way again. This happened about 10 years ago. My childhood was spent in a small but strangely unsettling house. For most of those years, I shared a bedroom with my older brother. The room had 2 twin beds, one for me, one for him. It wasn't very spacious, but for us, it was the safest place in the world. Or so we thought. That night began like any other. We had dinner, played around for a while, then climbed into our beds. The lights were switched off and only the pale glow of the moon slipped through the window, casting faint shadows on the walls. Everything felt calm, but that calm didn't last long. Just as I was about to drift into sleep, a strange feeling washed over me. It was as if someone was watching us. I couldn't see anything in the dark, but my heartbeat quickened. I pulled the blanket over my head and told myself it was only my imagination. And then, from the corner of the room, I heard footsteps. Slow, bare feet pressing against the floor. My ears sharpened, my breathing stopped. The sound drew closer and closer until it stopped right beside my bed. I forced myself to peek out from under the blanket. Nothing. The room was empty. My brother was still asleep, unaware of anything. I tried convincing myself again. It had to be my mind playing tricks. But then came another sound. Breathing. Heavy, deep, and cold. It felt like someone was standing right above me, exhaling onto my face. My body froze. My voice was trapped in my throat. Finally, I gathered courage and whispered, "Brother." He stirred and muttered sleepily, "What is it? Why aren't you asleep?" My voice trembled. "Someone's here. Someone's in our room." He laughed softly, rolling over. "You're crazy. Go to sleep. There's nothing here." His words gave me a fleeting comfort, but my heart still raced. And then, a loud knock rattled the window. We both shot up from our beds. The noise was so sharp and sudden that our bodies trembled. I scrambled to turn on the light and rushed to the window. Outside was nothing but darkness. No figure, no shadow, no one at all. Only silence. We exchanged terrified glances. For the first time, I saw the same fear reflected in my brother's eyes. It wasn't just my imagination. Something was in our room, wanted us to know it was there. After the knock on the window, sleep had completely vanished from our eyes. The silence of the room now felt heavy, suffocating. Even though the light was still on, the atmosphere had turned cold and unsettling. My brother closed the window and sat back down on his bed. He looked at me and said, "It was just the wind, nothing more." But I knew it couldn't have been the wind. The knock was too sharp, too deliberate, like a fist pounding against glass. My chest tightened, and unease settled deep within me. I whispered, "We should tell Mom and Dad." But he quickly cut me off. "Are you crazy? If we wake them up at this hour, they'll scold us. Just sleep. There's nothing here." I stayed quiet, but I couldn't close my eyes. My gaze kept darting around the room, the corners, the window, the shadows. And then suddenly, the light flickered and went out. The room was swallowed by pitch-black darkness. We both screamed at once. My brother scrambled to the switch, flipping it over and over, but the bulb refused to turn back on. Then we heard it, a faint rustling sound right in the middle of the room, as if something heavy was being dragged across the floor. Our bodies stiffened with fear. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, a shadow creeping along the wall. At first, I thought it was a trick of my mind, but then my brother whispered, his voice shaking, "Look, do you see that?" The shadow slithered unnaturally, stretching, twisting, bending in ways no human body could. It crawled toward us, closer and closer. I yanked the blanket over my face, but my brother found the courage to shout, "Who's there? Show yourself." His voice echoed in the room. For a moment, silence. Then, suddenly, a piercing scream erupted, one that didn't sound human at all. The sound rattled every bone in my body. My brother grabbed my hand and yelled, "We have to get out of this room, now." We bolted toward the door. He grabbed the handle but froze. It was ice cold, like gripping solid frost. He twisted it with all his strength, but the door wouldn't budge. It was sealed tight, as if something on the other side was holding it shut. We were trapped. The darkness pressed in closer. The shadow on the wall crept toward us, and for the first time, I knew we weren't alone. The door wouldn't open. No matter how hard we pulled, it was as if it had become part of the wall itself. We were trapped. Behind us, the shadow slithered along the wall, inching closer with every passing second. Its movements were unnatural, sometimes tall and stretched, sometimes hunched and twisted, sometimes crawling like it had too many limbs. My throat tightened, my chest burned. The terror was so real that I couldn't even scream. My brother's trembling voice broke the silence. "The window. We'll climb out through the window." We rushed toward it, banging on the glass with our fists. But no matter how hard we hit, the glass refused to break. It didn't even crack. It was like we were striking steel. Then, a sudden chill swept through the room. The shadow thickened, growing darker, until it dropped from the wall and landed on the floor with a thud. Slowly, it began to take form. A figure emerged, human-shaped, but wrong. Its face was nothing but emptiness. No eyes, no mouth, no features at all. Just a void. My legs trembled violently. My brother instinctively stepped in front of me, shielding me from the faceless being. It crouched low, dragging its fingers across the floor, and then lifted something up. When I saw it, my stomach dropped. It was an old rusted toy, the very same toy we had lost years ago. I whispered to my brother, It knows us." The faceless figure dropped the toy onto the ground between us and slowly retreated. But as it stepped back, voices filled the room, whispers from every corner, children laughing, a woman groaning, someone crying. Our heads spun. This wasn't just one presence. There were many. My brother squeezed my shoulder and shouted, "We have to say something, pray, anything, or this thing will kill us." Through my chattering teeth, I began reciting the same words our mother used to make us repeat before bed. My brother joined in. As the words filled the air, the figure recoiled, screeching. But its scream was so loud, so guttural, that the walls seemed to shake. And then, someone banged violently on the door from the other side, over and over, like something or someone was trying to break in. Wait for next video. Every sound in the forest seemed amplified, echoing in ways that sent chills down the spine. The rustling leaves whispered secrets only the trees could understand. Even the faintest snap of a twig felt like a warning, a signal that unseen eyes were watching. The forest was alive in a way that made human comprehension seem trivial, almost laughably small. The search party, led by my uncle, consisted of Rob, an experienced tracker, and a few trained hounds. What had started as a straightforward mission to find a missing father and his young grandson had gradually transformed into an encounter with something far more sinister. The forest seemed to twist their perception, blur the line between reality and nightmare. Broken twigs were arranged unnaturally. Clumps of fur, unlike any animal native to the area, littered the forest floor. And faint handprints carved into tree bark with meticulous care were everywhere. They seemed to plead, warn, or perhaps even mock the searchers. Each clue suggested intent. Someone or something was orchestrating events with chilling precision. By the fifth day, tension had grown unbearable. Rob, usually pragmatic, began admitting he could not explain what he was seeing. Shadows flitted between trees with no discernible source of light. Low whispers echoed, almost forming words, then fading when he tried to focus. Even the wolf whistle, initially a practical warning, seemed to guide them along paths that twisted and led nowhere. The nights were the hardest. Sleep evaded them, broken by imagined footsteps, rustling foliage, and distant, unplaceable sounds. My uncle often stayed awake the longest, scanning the blackened canopy. Thoughts of the boy and his father haunted him incessantly. Were they cold, hungry, frightened? Were they even alive? On the seventh day, a grim discovery sent shivers through the team. Beneath mud and decaying leaves lay a small, torn backpack. Inside were personal items, unmistakably belonging to the missing grandson. A notebook, a pencil, and a toy. The notebook's pages were filled with what initially appeared to be random scribbles. Closer inspection revealed the subtle hints, greater than "follow the light." Not everyone who helps is kind. The implications were clear. The forest was not passive. It was an entity with intention, guiding, misleading, and testing the searchers. Every sign, every shadow, every sound carried a purpose. The team realized that they were no longer just following tracks. They were unraveling a deliberate, unseen narrative. As the days passed, the forest's presence became heavier, almost suffocating. Rob, the most grounded of the team, confessed to seeing shadows move independently of wind, of objects, even of gravity. My uncle swore he heard faint conversations among the trees, as though the forest itself spoke in hushed tones, passing on messages only partially comprehensible. The wolf whistle, once a practical alert, had taken on a more ambiguous role. Sometimes it drew them closer, sometimes it led them astray. A creeping dread settled into their bones. Each member felt it, a recognition that forces beyond comprehension were observing their every move. Sleep, already scarce, became impossible. Every rustle was interpreted as a threat. Every gust of wind seemed like a sentient push, testing their resolve. Rob muttered repeatedly, "These tracks, they're not human. None of this can belong to someone alive." My uncle, sensing the truth, nodded silently. The distinction between reality and nightmare blurred. The forest was alive in ways they could not yet understand. On the 10th day, the hounds led the team to an abandoned cabin hidden within a grove. The structure, nearly consumed by nature, emitted a palpable sense of foreboding. Its door hung crookedly, creaking ominously in the wind. Inside were remnants of recent occupation. A small cot, a few cans of food, and crude carvings on the walls depicting a family lost in an endless forest. The air was thick, part decay, part smoke, part something else entirely, something unplaceable. A chill ran down my uncle's spine. Every instinct screamed danger, yet the signs suggested human habitation, perhaps even recent. Following the cabin's clues, the team ventured into a narrow valley encased by sheer cliffs. Footprints led into a cavern partially concealed by overgrown vines. Darkness inside seemed alive, almost sentient, as if it were breathing, waiting. Suddenly, the boy appeared, alive yet terrified, standing beside a towering figure far larger than any human. The figure did not move aggressively, but observed them with a calm, almost intelligent intensity. My uncle raised his voice softly. "It's okay. We're here to help." The boy's eyes darted between the team and the figure. In a hushed whisper, he said, "They're not what they seem. They watch, but they protect too." The forest itself seemed to hold its breath. The towering figure finally stepped aside, allowing the boy to approach. My uncle embraced him, relief washing over the group. Yet questions remained. Shadows, the wolf whistle, and unexplained signs all suggested that the forest held secrets beyond human understanding. As they began leading the boy back, my uncle glanced over his shoulder at the lingering silhouettes. They faded into the dense foliage, leaving a sense of awe, fear, and unexplainable wonder. Though physically relieved, the psychological toll lingered. Rob admitted to experiencing inexplicable vertigo, as if reality itself shifted beneath him. Nights became haunted by dreams of moving shadows and whispered messages. The forest had left a mark, not only on their memory but on their very perception of reality. The boy clung to his father, and my uncle felt a surge of protective instinct, a reaffirmation of the human drive to confront fear and protect the vulnerable. The forest had tested them, but it had also guided them toward hope. In the valley, as the team led the boy out, a faint wolf whistle echoed again. This time, there was no threat, only guidance. The tall, shadowy figures lingered at the forest's edge, silent sentinels watching over the group. The boy looked back and smiled faintly, a gesture of reassurance that the forest's guardians were not entirely malevolent. The father and grandson were safe, yet the forest's mysteries remained. It was alive, watching, and deliberate. My uncle realized a profound truth. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the persistence to act despite it. Life's uncertainties are often beyond comprehension, yet hope and determination light the way. The story of the missing father and grandson became legend, whispered in local villages. The tale carried awe, fear, and respect for the forest. But my uncle always understood the deeper truth. The forest was sentient in ways humans rarely perceive. Sometimes the greatest danger carries the greatest protection. The boy eventually recovered, yet the memory of the forest and its guardians remained etched in his mind. The father, once overwhelmed by fear, now carried a renewed sense of reverence for the unknown. The team returned to their lives forever changed. Even years later, whispers of the forest's sentinels persisted. Travelers reported fleeting shadows, distant whistles, and signs that no human could explain. The legend grew, but my uncle knew its core. The forest was alive, and sometimes the most terrifying mysteries are also the most protective forces of all. The missing father and grandson had been found, but the forest retained its secrets. My uncle learned that true bravery is not the absence of fear. It is acting in spite of it. Life is filled with enigmas, but hope, persistence, and courage guide us through darkness. And as they looked back one final time, the silhouettes at the forest's edge vanished into shadow, leaving awe, fear, and an unshakable realization. Some mysteries are never meant to be solved, but they are still worth confronting. It was one of those warm summer nights when the air felt gentle, yet the shadows seemed too long. I was 17, my sister 20, and we were walking through our quiet little valley. Our favorite spot was the local elementary school playground, where swings and slides had been our companions for years. The night was peaceful, or so we thought. We had just returned from grabbing snacks at the local store, sitting on the swings, laughing, sharing stories. I felt safe, but suddenly a sharp thud broke the calm. A small stone hit the gravel a few feet away. My heart skipped a beat. "Did you hear that?" I whispered to my sister. She hadn't. Another thud came, closer this time. The darkness suddenly felt alive. The playground, familiar in daylight, had transformed into a maze of shadows and uncertainty. Another stone fell, this one striking dangerously near the swing we were on. My sister and I instinctively scrambled, using the swing set poles as a makeshift shield. Every nerve in my body screamed that we were being watched. Then I saw him. A tall, hooded figure stood on the roof of the school building. His cloak or coat reached his ankles, and the hood shadowed his face completely. My sister gasped, clutching my arm. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Fear rooted me to the ground. The stones kept coming closer each time. My imagination ran wild, picturing every horror story I had ever heard. But this was real. Real enough to make my knees shake and my hands tremble. The figure's presence was oppressive, yet silent. We couldn't see his face, couldn't tell his intentions, but the weight of his gaze was enough to freeze us in place. We ran, scrambling through the fence onto the side street. Our breaths came in short, frantic gasps. Every sound behind us, an echo, a rustle, a clink, made us flinch. Were the stones still following? Was he coming after us? Once home, safety was relative. The walls could not protect our minds from the memory of that night. Every shadow in the room, every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind reminded us of him. Sleep became impossible. The fear had grown from a sudden shock into a lingering companion. We were cautious everywhere. Daylight didn't remove the tension. Every stranger, every unfamiliar noise made our hearts race. Weeks later, a small stone appeared on our garden path. Smooth, deliberate, unlike any stone nearby. My sister held it, pale and trembling. He's still here, she whispered. And she was right. Finally, unable to tolerate the fear any longer, we decided to confront it. We returned to the school playground, standing at the edge where the first stone had landed. Our hearts hammered, our breaths shallow. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound amplified. And then he appeared, the hooded figure, taller than I remembered, unmoving but full of menace. Another stone fell, striking the gravel near our feet. My stomach turned. Arzu and I froze, feeling the same terror as before. But now, a strange determination formed in the back of my mind. "Who are you? What do you want?" I shouted, my voice trembling but louder than before. No response. Only the dark silhouette, silent and commanding. Another stone fell. My sister screamed softly. My heart pounded. But something had changed. I refused to let fear control me. We weren't going to run blindly this time. The figure raised his hand, paused, then disappeared. Just like that, silence returned, but heavier, charged with an invisible weight. Months later, while helping a neighbor, we found an old newspaper clipping. Mysterious rooftop watcher sparks fear in local schools. The hooded figure wasn't unique to us. He had been haunting our valley for years, leaving children and teenagers terrified, yet never caught. He had been a shadow in the night, real yet elusive, feeding on fear and remaining unseen. We realized that surviving wasn't just about fleeing. It was about courage, about reclaiming control over our lives and our minds. The figure may have existed, but his power depended on fear. And now we understood. Courage could illuminate even the darkest corners. Years later, Arzu and I returned to the schoolyard. The swings moved gently in the breeze. Children laughed and ran across the playground. The gravel sparkled harmlessly. We paused where the stones had fallen, where the hooded figure had stood. For a fleeting moment, the shadows seemed alive. But then, nothing. No figure, no stones, no screams. We smiled, hand in hand. Fear had no hold over us anymore. The valley, the shadows, even the memory of that night had become a story of survival, courage, and the bond between two sisters. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faint memory of a scream, a shadow, and the resilience of two sisters who refused to be broken by fear. From that night on, we walked through the valley with a new awareness. Shadows may exist, but courage and unity could always guide us through the darkness. Most school days feel predictable, almost boring. You enter the classroom, sit at your desk, glance at the clock, and wait for the day to end. But sometimes, what seems ordinary twists into something unimaginable, a nightmare that leaves marks on your mind forever. This story begins on a seemingly normal Friday afternoon during 7th period calculus class, a day that started like any other and ended as one I could never forget. Spring break was just around the corner. The energy in the room was palpable. Students whispered, fidgeted, and glanced repeatedly at the clock, wishing the minutes away. Our teacher, Mr. Hayes, a calm man known for his laid-back attitude, decided to lighten the mood with an online brand logo quiz. We thought it was harmless, fun, a distraction from the mundane rhythm of the school day. We laughed at ridiculous answers, teased one another over wrong guesses, and shared inside jokes. The room felt warm, familiar, safe. Every click of the mouse, every snicker, every whispered joke built a false sense of security. Then, the loudspeaker crackled. "Attention, all staff. This is not a drill. Begin lockdown procedures immediately." My stomach dropped. Goosebumps raced down my arms. Mr. Hayes, usually unflappable, looked genuinely frightened. He switched off the lights and guided us to the back corner. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. Fear replaced laughter instantly. We huddled together, whispering questions we had no answers to. A scream tore down the hallway. A high-pitched, frantic, blood-curdling wail that made our hearts pound. 2 girls sobbed uncontrollably, their cries echoing through the walls. Every creak, shadow, and distant whisper seemed like a threat inching closer. "Stay quiet. Don't move. Don't make a sound. Breathe slowly," Mr. Hayes whispered, his voice a fragile lifeline. Faces froze in terror. Some whispered prayers. Others could not stop shaking. Footsteps approached, heavy and deliberate. A man started banging on lockers, shouting in a voice that could freeze anyone's blood. "I'll kill all of you." My chest tightened, not just for myself, but for everyone in the room. Seconds stretched like hours. Time slowed, each heartbeat echoing fear's relentless drum. "Do you think he's coming here?" whispered a trembling voice. I can't tell. Every sound feels like he's right outside." Another whispered, "No one moves. Not a single sound." "Stay calm and trust me," Mr. Hayes said, his voice a lifeline amid chaos. The banging grew louder, now at our classroom door. "No, please," a girl screamed, her voice cracking. The sound reverberated, slicing through the tension like a knife. Minutes dragged, each heartbeat heavier than the last. I felt my pulse in my throat. Every small noise, a pencil dropping, a paper shuffle, made my body jolt. I closed my eyes, trying to imagine we were safe, but the fear was tangible. The man pounded on the door, shouting for us to open up. His voice twisted and deranged, echoing down the hallways. 2 girls' cries intensified, panic consuming the room like wildfire. "Why is this happening? Why here? Why now?" whispered a student. "Focus on your breathing. You are safe for now. Do not panic," Mr. Hayes urged softly. Adrenaline surged. Every muscle in my body tensed. Thoughts raced. Possible escape routes, silent prayers, desperate scenarios. Every second stretched unbearably. Then, finally, he moved down the hall. Silence returned, fragile but sharp. 10 minutes later, the dean spoke over the loudspeaker, calm yet urgent. "A mentally unstable person has entered the building and assaulted a staff member at the front desk. The staff member fled. We do not know if the person is armed. Teachers, keep all doors locked. No student is to leave." Fear returned heavier than before. We were trapped. Every glance toward the door, every creak, every whisper carried the threat of imminent danger. "Do you think he'll come back?" a student whispered. I don't want to find out," another muttered. "Help is on the way. Stay calm," Mr. Hayes reassured. The lockdown stretched through lunch. The multi-purpose room became our fragile refuge. Students whispered, clutched hands, and speculated. Rumors of weapons, mental instability, and dangerous intent spread like wildfire. Every sound, shadow, and distant footstep thickened fear. "Do you think he saw us?" "Knows where we are," whispered one student. "Just let this end. Please let it end," another whispered, clutching their backpack tightly. Minutes dragged like hours. Every heartbeat and breath carried the weight of terror. Fear wrapped around us like smoke, seeping into every thought. Some students silently prayed. Others stared at walls, imagining shadows that weren't there. Staff discovered the man hiding in a storage closet near the back of the school. Rumors claimed he carried a .44 Magnum. Panic surged anew. He was right there, hiding. We could have been next, one student whispered. "Yes, stay calm, don't panic. Help is on the way," Mr. Hayes reassured. Even knowing he was found didn't soothe our minds. Terror lingered, replaying every sound, shadow, and floor creak. Each memory, each echo, clung to our minds like a heavy fog. We were escorted back to classrooms. The echoes of fear did not leave. Some students sat motionless, staring at the ceiling, reliving every scream, every bang, every frantic heartbeat. Some cried quietly. Others whispered reassurances to themselves or anyone near them. I couldn't stop thinking about the man's eyes, the voice, the randomness of danger. Questions circled endlessly. Why us? Why that classroom? Why that day? Every ordinary object, the door, the lockers, the hallways, had transformed into symbols of terror. Police apprehended the man. The staff member survived. Lockdown lifted. Students were escorted to safety. But the memory remained indelible. What began as a normal day ended in fear and trauma. Even after the threat was gone, echoes remained. The screams, pounding, and terror replayed in minds, refusing to let go. Fear became a ghost that followed silently, waiting to reappear in quiet moments. The story reminds us how fragile safety is. Ordinary days can twist into nightmares. Courage, hope, and calm carry us through terror. Some days begin ordinary, some end in fear. That Friday was both, etched in survival, terror, and hope. Years later, the screams, the pounding, the fear remain etched in memory. A lesson in resilience, unpredictability, and the thin line between normalcy and nightmare. It was midnight when the college bus, carrying a group of senior students, rattled down the winding forest roads of Maine. The tires crunched on gravel like jagged teeth. Mist clung to the trees, curling around the bus like spectral snakes. The distant hoot of an owl echoed through the thick darkness. Inside, the students were exhausted, some sleeping, others whispering in semi-conscious states. Ethan, a quiet and intelligent loner, woke and pressed his forehead against the cold window, peering into the shadowy forest. "Professor Harris," he whispered, voice trembling. "Can we stop soon? I need a restroom break." Professor Harris, tall and scholarly, nodded. "Of course, Ethan. We'll stop at the next safe spot." Yet his voice carried a faint unease, for the forest felt alive, watching, waiting. The bus slowed as a herd of wild boars crossed the road, snorting and rustling through the underbrush. Students stirred in sudden alarm. Tires screeched, the bus jolted. Mist and shadow danced across the windows, creating shifting skeletal shapes. Ethan gripped his seat, heart pounding. "Something's not right," he murmured. The bus eventually pulled over at a deserted roadside. The fog swallowed the surroundings entirely. Harris stepped out first, boots crunching over gravel. Students followed hesitantly. Cold wind bit at their skin. Ethan and Ryan stepped off together. Suddenly, Ryan screamed. His foot had caught on thorns, blood spreading quickly. A biker appeared from the fog, headlight beams slicing through the mist. "You shouldn't be here. This road is cursed. The Phantom Walker haunts travelers at night." Harris tried to rationalize. "That's impossible. Just an old story." But Ethan felt it, a chilling certainty. Something was watching, waiting. The bus moved again, the forest now unnaturally quiet. Shadows flickered at the edges of perception. Every turn seemed familiar, as if the forest were looping. When the bus stopped at another deserted road, Ethan stepped off with Ryan. Fog clung to their legs. The world felt suspended. "Look," Ethan pointed to the tea shack ahead. "We passed this place already." Ryan laughed nervously. "You're imagining things. It's late. Everything looks the same." But Ethan was not imagining. The same decrepit tea shack appeared again and again, the faded sign creaking in the wind. "Haven's Rest." Panic rose among the students. Driver Victor denied the strangeness, but Harris felt it. The loop, the curse, the inevitability. Shadows grew longer. Whispers rose from the fog itself. "Turn back. Turn back. You are trapped." Ethan whispered to himself. "It's feeding on our fear. The more we panic, the stronger it becomes." The bus repeatedly passed the same landmarks. Trees bent unnaturally. Shadows pressed against the windows. Students' panic escalated. Trust eroded. Harris shouted for calm. "Everyone, stay together. Panic will only make this worse." The bus hit a patch of ice, skidding violently. Ryan screamed. Victor struggled to regain control. The fog thickened, swirling like smoke. Ethan saw the figure in the rearview mirror, a dark, faceless shape gliding behind them. It did not move like a human. "Stay calm. It's feeding on us," Ethan warned. Shadows whispered names, mocking, cruel. Time twisted. Every turn brought the same sights. Haven's Rest, bent trees, rusted signposts. Fear became physical weight pressing down on them. Eventually, the bus reached a village Collins claimed as his hometown. Small wooden houses lined the street. Lantern light glowed dimly in the mist. Ethan felt a chill. The village was silent, too silent. The mist moved unnaturally, curling into faces and windows. Then they saw them. Bodies. Colin's family lay slaughtered in the yard. Blood pooled around them. Horror froze the students. A one-eyed old man stepped forward, trembling. "You brought them here. You brought death upon them." The villagers, faces hollow, closed in on Collins. Chaos erupted. Blood spattered walls. Screams echoed. Students huddled, crying. Victor fought to drive, but trees bent unnaturally, holding the bus back. The screams of the village trailed them as the bus fled. Ethan realized the curse was everywhere, persistent, eternal. The walker thrived on fear and chaos. Fear and paranoia consumed the bus. Ethan realized that the Phantom Walker was among them. Harris attacked Ryan, convinced he was possessed. Paul, terrified, stabbed Victor. Shadows crept closer with every scream, every act of violence feeding the walker. Trust shattered. Every glance was suspicion, every whisper a potential betrayal. The students realized that the walker's power was not only supernatural, it manipulated their minds. Ethan drove the bus. Suddenly, Paul died at Ryan's hands. Ethan laughed hysterically, eyes glowing red. "The Phantom Walker is me," he declared. He revealed that he had died earlier in the forest and was possessed, orchestrating every betrayal, every murder. He had manipulated Colin's death and provoked the students into chaos. The Walker's influence twisted reality, feeding on fear, making every act of desperation and violence part of its strength. Ryan and the remaining survivors fought Ethan. Iron rods smashed against his head, shadows twisted, forming grotesque figures. Finally, a direct blow released a burst of black smoke, the Walker's essence breaking free. The forest seemed to release a held breath. The survivors, bloodied and exhausted, were alive but forever scarred. The Phantom Walker had been defeated for the first time. Weeks later, 4 friends, Alex, Daniel, Chris, and Mia, drove the winding roads of Colorado at night. Music and laughter masked unease. Suddenly, Alex braked. A girl stood by the roadside, terrified. "Please, get me to Bolton. They're after me." Torches appeared in the mist. Figures chanted in low voices. Panic escalated. At a diner, food writhed with maggots. A skeletal cook warned, "He has reached you." None ever escaped suspicion, tore the group apart. Mia strangled the girl. Chris hit her with iron. Suddenly, Chris's body twisted into a monstrous apparition. "None leave my labyrinth alive," he screamed. The friends fought desperately. Dawn broke. The monstrous form dissolved into mist. The survivors drove on in silence. The Phantom Walker had been defeated, but the terror remained. Whispers spread through forests and mountain roads across America. The curse waited patiently for the next traveler, the next moment of fear. In the silence of the night, even the smallest sounds make the heart tremble. The rustling of trees, the light tapping of rain on the window, or the ticking clock in the room. Everything creates a strange kind of unease. But when, among those sounds, an unknown and unnatural whisper is heard, a person's hair stands on end. This is the story of an ordinary girl named Mariam. Mariam's life was completely normal. She was a university student, laughed and joked with friends, read books late at night in her small room, and sometimes got scared herself while watching horror movies. But she never imagined that one day a cursed toy would enter her life that would push her entire world into darkness. One day, Mariam's close friend Hira gave her a gift. It was a beautiful box wrapped in colorful papers. Mariam happily opened the box and took out a strange, doll-like toy. This was no ordinary doll. Its eyes were large, its teeth sharp, and its face carried a smile that looked as innocent as it was frightening. Inside the box was a small note that said, "This is La Boo Boo doll. Handle it with care." Mariam laughed and said, "Hira, what kind of scary toy have you brought me? It looks terrifying." Hira smiled and replied, "It just seemed unique, so I got it. They say it's a famous Chinese collection. Rare. Keep it, it'll look nice." Mariam didn't think much about it and placed the doll on her study table. That night, Mariam had a dream. In it, she was sitting in her room, but the light was dim. Suddenly, the Labubu doll began to move. Its eyes glowed red, and it kept repeating the same words. "Play with me. Play with me." Mariam screamed and woke up, drenched in sweat. She looked at the clock. It was 3 a.m. Nervously, she got up to drink water and glanced at the Labubu doll in the corner. It was sitting exactly as before. "Maybe this is just my imagination," Mariam whispered to herself. But in reality, It wasn't imagination. Miriam had a pet dog named Black. The next day, when Miriam touched the Labubu doll, Black started barking furiously. His eyes turned red, and he leapt at the doll as if he wanted to tear it apart. Miriam found this behavior strange. He had never been this aggressive. When she placed the doll back on the table, Black calmed down, but his eyes remained fixed on the toy. That night, Miriam entered another dream. This time, she found herself in a dark room where old paintings were hanging on the walls. In every painting, the same thing appeared: Labubu doll. Sometimes it stood under a tree, sometimes in a child's hand, sometimes sitting on a grave. In every picture, that same demonic smile, those empty eyes. Miriam turned around and saw the doll actually standing behind her. Its voice echoed, "You have called me. Now I will never leave." At that moment, Miriam woke up. Now Miriam began to feel strange things even during the day, as if someone was walking in her room. Sometimes a book would fall on its own. Sometimes the curtain on the window would move without wind. One day when she returned from university, she froze at the sight of her room. The Labubu doll was no longer on the study table, but sitting on her bed. Miriam's hands started trembling. How is this possible? I placed it on the table. She quickly picked up the doll and put it back on the table, but a wave of fear ran through her heart. Even in daylight, Miriam began to feel as if someone was following her. When she studied, the words on the page seemed to shift strangely, as if someone had blown on them. Sometimes she heard whispers in her ears. "Miriam, I am here. Don't leave me alone." Startled, Miriam would look around, but no one was there. Only the cursed doll sat on the study table, smiling. One night, Miriam went to the kitchen to drink water. As soon as she opened the fridge, she felt someone standing behind her. Nervously, she turned around, but there was nothing. But when she returned to her room, her feet froze to the ground. The Labubu doll was now standing in the middle of the room. Miriam's heart pounded. She couldn't think how this was possible. Her hands shook, but she gathered courage, picked up the doll, and put it back on the table. Suddenly, Black started barking loudly and lunged at the toy. Miriam held him back, but in his eyes was such terror as if he could see something Miriam couldn't. The next day, Miriam called her friend, Hira. "Hira, that doll you gave me. It's strange. Every night I have terrifying dreams, and it moves from place to place." Hira laughed at first. "Oh, silly. It's just your imagination. You've been watching too many horror movies." Miriam angrily said, "No, Hira. I'm not joking. This doll, it's scary. Even Black barks at it. I think there's something in it." Hira was silent for a moment, then said, "Okay, I'll come to your house tomorrow." The next evening, Miriam and Hira prepared to destroy the Labubu doll. They dug a pit in the backyard and gathered dry wood. Miriam's hands trembled, but her eyes were determined. "Today it all ends," Miriam said, and threw the doll on the ground. Hira lit the fire. Flames rose high. Together they threw the Labubu doll into the fire. But something strange happened. The fire began to die. Flames that burned strongly suddenly dimmed, as if water had been poured over them. The doll's smile grew even more terrifying. Its eyes glowed red, and a crackling voice echoed, "Do you think you can destroy me? I have lived for centuries. I do not burn." Miriam and Hira stepped back. The ground shook, and the air grew icy cold. Their breath turned into fog as if it were the dead of winter. A black shadow formed around the doll, slowly taking human shape. It was the shadow of a woman, her eyes empty, her face distorted. She screamed, This doll is mine. It is the prison of my soul. As long as someone remembers me, I will never die. Mariam asked in a trembling voice, "Who are you? What do you want from us?" The shadow said, "I am Emily's mother. I sacrificed my life trying to save my daughter. But this doll trapped my soul too. Now I remain with anyone who keeps it. And now, it's your turn." Courage rose in Mariam's heart. She thought, if she backed away now, this cursed thing would haunt her forever. She picked up a metal rod nearby and struck the doll with all her strength. Instead of breaking, the doll screamed. This time, the scream was human. "You cannot harm me," it growled. But Mariam did not stop. She struck again and again, reciting verses and prayers in her heart. Hera joined her, and together they smashed the doll. With a loud explosion, smoke burst from the doll. The black shadow rose into the air, letting out a piercing scream. The ground shook, branches snapped, and the flames roared back to life. "You have freed me from this prison. But remember, freedom and destruction go hand in hand. I will return, forever." And then the shadow vanished into the darkness. The doll had burned to ashes. For a while, both stood silently. The atmosphere was calm. The fire slowly died down. Mariam took a deep breath and said, "Maybe it's over." Hera put a hand on her shoulder. "Yes, maybe." But in both of their hearts, fear remained. Was it really over? Or was it just at the beginning? Mariam returned to university. Life became somewhat normal again. But sometimes she felt someone watching her. In the corner of the room, in the mirror, or in her dreams. That same smile appeared. One night while Mariam was studying, suddenly, a piece of paper fell on her desk. On it was written, "I am still here. Play with me." The pen slipped from Mariam's hand. Slowly, she raised her head. On the study table, from the pile of ashes, the face of the Labubu doll was emerging. The story of the Labubu doll does not end here. Wherever this toy goes, it brings darkness, horror, and death with it. Mariam's life had now become part of a game from which escape was impossible. Sometimes it's better to let some things go, because some stories never end.